Hello and welcome to episode 86 of the Wisdom from the Akasha podcast. My name is Suzie. I'm your host and I'm an Akashic Records practitioner and teacher. On the podcast, you will have heard me talk before, if you're a regular listener, about the law of three. The law of three is seen across all esoteric teachings, but it's really kind of defined and specified in fourth way teachings. Now, I'm not a fourth way teacher, but I do think that the way that the fourth way talks about the law of three, which we'll get into today, is very helpful, and it's really good for us understanding the types of energies that we're working in, especially when it comes to achieving internal balance. Okay, because internal balance is absolutely crucial to ensure that we can expand, we can evolve. In previous podcast episodes, I've talked quite a lot about neutral energy. So talking about the importance of creating space, spending time in silence, doing things where you're not consuming, taking a break from the noise. And I've also talked a little bit about the passive energy, so the consumption energy. So not to get obsessive or neurotic about consumption, but also to be mindful of it and to be mindful of how that affects us. In today's podcast episode, I want to talk a little bit about the active energy, because it's important that we understand all three energies. It's important that we understand when we are working in certain energies, when we're in certain energies, so that we can really feel into, okay, what's the correct balance for me? So in my mentorship program, there is a take-on questionnaire, and one of the take-on questionnaire questions is to split your average day into active, passive, and neutral. And I have seen over the years, working with people one-on-one, that if we can work to get that balance correct for you as an individual, what you feel is correct for you, life really does open up for you. So it is important to understand these different energies. Now, why is this important to understand this active energy at this time? At this time that we are going through of mass awakening. The reason it's so important is because I think a lot of the time people get confused about active energy being the same as productivity. So I want to get into this today. I want to get into what the active energy actually is, why it's important, and some tips to help you really connect into this conscious active energy. I should also mention that I apologise if the audio is not great on this one. I am still full of a little bit of a head cold. This is from being on an aeroplane. It always tends to bung me up. So I do apologise today, but please bear with me because I promise the information is going to be interesting. So what is this active energy, and how is this active energy different from productive? Okay. We live in a world that is obsessed, capital letters, underlined, bold, neon lights, with productivity. Okay. This is a consequence, a byproduct of the various different systems that we have in place, which we won't get into today, but productivity is often mindless, okay, or mechanical. So what you will find in your daily life is that you will often be very, very busy, but it's not busy consciously. We're being productive. We're getting stuff done. We start the day with a huge big to-do list and we make our way through it. We watch videos about productivity hacks and how to get more done in a day. This is not what I'm referring to when I'm talking about the active energy. Okay. Now, we all know that busyness doesn't even equal productivity. I remember working in corporate, and my days would be filled with meetings. There would be a meeting before the meeting, then there would be the meeting, and then there would be a meeting after the meeting. And before you know it, your entire day is done. A lot of this could have been put down to email. Now, if you're interested in kind of this obsession with busyness and how to become actually more productive, I would highly recommend the work of Cal Newport. I think he does a brilliant job. He has a podcast called Deep Questions, I believe. And he talks about this, especially for people who are knowledge workers. And I would highly recommend looking at that so that you can make sure that you are making the most of your time, whether that's you running your business or doing your day job, whatever that is, but that you're actually being productive rather than busy. So if that's what you're looking for in respect of this episode, definitely check out Cal Newport's work. But I'm going to specifically focus not on productivity and productivity hacks, which definitely seem to be all the rage, but what I want to talk about today is creativity and how to tap into this creative life force that you have within you, and ultimately not only tapping into it, but doing something with it, actually creating. Lots of people and lots of you listening today are going to feel very disconnected from this internal creative energy that you have. And it's important that we do work to reconnect to this internal creative energy, because this is one of the ways our soul, our higher self, speaks to us. Okay? We need to be able to feel into this creative force to support our evolution, our expansion. It's one of the forces that we're working with. So I want to look at a couple of the reasons that I see with people who I work with. So this is my experience as to why people are disconnected or feel very disconnected from this creative energy, and then talk about why it really does matter that we do work to establish a good connection to this. Reason number one is what I've just talked about, this complete obsession with productivity, being busy and being seen to be busy, and having this busyness attached to worthiness, rather than actually being creative. So not necessarily concerning ourselves with what are we putting out there into the world, what work are we doing, how are we creating, but just, am I busy all day? Do people see me and think, oh my God, this person's so busy, they must be so important? Is there a worthiness thing attached to it? Second reason is people's lives are genuinely very, very busy. Okay? I completely appreciate that our modern lives are very designed to fill all of the gaps. Okay, so even when we're not busy doing something off our to-do list, we're busy doing something else. So there's a busyness around it. Creating time, which is often essential for creativity, isn't usually on people's priority list, especially if you've got young children, maybe you're working 2 jobs. There can be a lot going on, okay? So I don't ever want anyone to think that I'm dismissing that some people's lives are just genuinely very, very busy. The third reason is we have very much slipped into a consumption-obsessed society. So when we aren't being busy, we are consuming. So when we actually sit down at the end of the day, we get onto social media and scroll, we watch YouTube videos, we listen to podcast episodes. We've very much been kind of herded into a consumption society. And again, there's lots of different reasons for this, but we have to acknowledge this if we're going to change things. Please, if you feel when I'm talking about this consumption society and you're like, this is me, I'm social media addict, I can spend hours doom scrolling. Please know that social media companies design their products to keep you on them, to keep you scrolling, to be addictive. Okay, I see a lot of people come to me who I work with, and they're really being hard on themselves and beating themselves up and saying, why can't I just not do that? But please remember that you've got multiple millions of dollars against you designing things to try and keep you on them. Your attention is a currency in this world. Okay, so please don't beat yourself up about it. And there are ways and means of reducing that if that is something that you have going on. The fourth reason is that because of all of this, people are really uncomfortable with actually being bored. People find the energy of boredom very, very, very uncomfortable, because sometimes when you're bored, you're going to have things come up that maybe you're trying to avoid, maybe you're trying to push to one side. But what we have to understand, that what I've found in my work and certainly in my life, is that this boredom energy is actually a precursor to be able to tap into that creative energy. So we don't go from productive busyness straight into creative energy. Okay. It's a too big a gear shift, if you want to use that analogy. So what we usually have to do is go from productive energy, so busyness, into some form of neutral energy, so shifting the gear down a little bit. Then that neutral energy is going to take us into boredom. And if we can stick with that energy and get through that energy, we break through into creativity. So that's usually the pattern of how we work energetically. The fifth reason is that creativity and creative endeavors have been relegated by society. You've been programmed to believe that doing creative things is unimportant or pointless. If there isn't an end in sight, so if you're not doing this for something, if you're not doing this to make money, if you're not doing this as part of your job, then there's no point in doing it. And this couldn't be further from the truth. So if you have this underlying belief and narrative, perhaps it's in your subconscious, that spending time being creative is pointless or it's a waste of your time or something like that, definitely work on deconditioning and deprogramming that. So that's just 5 of the reasons as to why people do feel very disconnected. As you can see, our society that we're in is very much against us when it comes to honouring and supporting creative energy. So we have to consciously work to do this ourselves. Now, before I get into the how, why does it matter? Why is it important that we do start to connect into this creative energy? The first point I want to really emphasize, and it's kind of the reason I'm doing this episode, is without this creative energy, without tuning into this creative energy, society as a whole and you individually are going to stagnate. Okay. I listened to a really good podcast episode by Alchemy of Ideas. If you don't listen to it, great podcast. And they talked about the concept of, are we as a society in decadence? And they talked about how many inventions, actually life-changing inventions, were brought forward in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And we're questioning, okay, what do we actually have now? Other than innovation in respect of technology, which is debatable in respect of how much that actually improves the quality of our life, where is this creativity? In the late 1800s, early 1900s, we have the light bulb, we have refrigeration. There's so many things that people were creating, people were bringing forward, bringing through them to expand, evolve society. It seems that when a society goes into decadence, according to Alchemy of Ideas, that all of that stops. And I think a large part of the reason that that is stopping is because we aren't connecting to this creative energy and we aren't encouraged to do so. And it is essential if we want to continue our expansion and our evolution as a soul. The second reason that this is important is because this is one of the ways our soul speaks to us. Okay? We want to be in constant communication with our soul, with our higher self. We have many higher aspects of ourself, and we always have the answer within us in respect of what's the next best step. How can I move forward? This is your intuition. This is your internal technology. You have all of this within you. And one of the ways that the soul speaks is through creativity. So whilst you're being creative, while you're doing a creative activity, it may be that you receive a download, or you channel something through, or you really feel that you have a deep knowing in respect of those next steps that maybe you've been trying to consciously think on with your brain. But because you go into creative energy, you're tapping into a different part of the brain, which allows it to be more receptive and pick up on these new ideas. So we have to understand that we're constantly changing. This is the Buddhist idea of impermanence. And if we're not tuning into that creative energy, we stop evolving and we stop being able to hear our soul. So we feel stuck, we feel very stagnant. The third reason that this is important is because our soul chooses to come here with a mission and a purpose, and it's usually more than one thing that we're here to do. There can be an overarching theme, but then there's different little things that the soul wants to achieve, the soul wants to experience here on earth. And if we're not taking the opportunity to listen, not only in that neutral energy, but also in that creative energy, then how do we know the things that need to be born through us? So when you're tuning into that creative energy, the creative energy that exists throughout creation, if you're not tuning into that, then how do you know what wants to be born through you? How do you know what your soul is trying to feed into you for you to bring into material reality to help you and to help humanity evolve? And the fourth reason is that if we focus our attention or our consciousness on what is falling apart only, what's breaking down only, rather than what can we consciously create, what can we bring through, how do we expect to be active participants in the co-creation of the higher timelines, of the evolutionary timelines for ourselves individually, for Earth herself, and for humanity as a whole? Okay? If we're just obsessing over what's happening in respect of things falling apart, things falling away, we're never taking the time to go, okay, well, what's being called through me? What do I need to do to help evolution and expansion? So now that we understand what the creative energy is in respect of this law of three, or the Trinity in some esoteric circles, why we're disconnected from it, and also why it matters, let's take a look at how you can actually take back a little bit of control of this and start to really tune into and work with this creative energy. And this creative energy is the same creative life force energy that runs through the entirety of creation. Okay? You want to start tuning into it, become a channel of it, because then you're going to evolve and then you're going to expand. So how do we do this? First of all, of course, is going to be let yourself actually get bored. Okay? The energy of boredom is designed to urge you to do something. What happens most of the time is when we get bored, we go, right, I need to entertain myself. So I'm going to scroll, I'm going to watch something on TV, I'm going to do something to take away the discomfort of the boredom, because either that boredom energy is going to bring up something that I don't want to deal with, or it's going to cause me to entropy. That's what we have a belief of, but actually it's the opposite. What happens when we actually lean into that boredom energy, as I talked about a little bit earlier, we're going to get through it into the creative energy. That urge is to say, okay, what can you create? What can you do? And when this boredom comes in, just pick up a pen and start to write. Just pick up a paintbrush and start to paint. Okay, just do something that is a creative activity. For some of you, that might be baking. But when that urge comes in, start to connect into the creative energy in a way that works for you. Now, the hardest thing that comes up here when we're going to sit in the boredom, we're going to get through that, and we're going to start doing this creative stuff, is you're going to have a lot of egoic noise. Okay? This might be egoic noise from your childhood saying, why are you painting? You're never going to be an artist. Don't do it. Or why are you writing that? What's it for? You know, there's going to be a lot of egoic noise, and it's important to try and work through that egoic noise. Acknowledge it, maybe have a notebook so you can put down that kind of the programs that you're running in respect of this, and understand that this is not something that you're creating for a reason at this point. At this point, it's just about being creative. It's not about perfectionism. It's not about doing anything right or wrong. It's just being in connection to that energy. The second suggestion is to take up a new creative hobby within your community. And the reason I'm saying creative hobby within your community is because both of these actions, so being creative and getting out into your community, are very connected to your internal feminine energy, and your internal feminine energy is very connected to your creativity, your intuition. So doing an activity within the community is really going to help strengthen your connection to this. So this could be helping to build a community garden, could be going to a pottery class, it could be going to a cookery class, whatever is going to tick both of those boxes. The third recommendation is to really look at your sacral chakra. So sacral chakra is the first of the feminine energy dominant chakras, and it's very connected to your creative energy, which is your sexual energy. It's through the womb in women that life itself is created. And what I see a lot with people who I work with one-on-one is that they have a lot of stuff, a lot of energetic stagnation around sacral chakra. So this could be wounds around sexual trauma, it could be addictions, could be just repressed emotions. And also we tend to have a lot of our feminine energy wounds in the sacral. So this could be connected to mother wounding, sister wounding, which can be from current life, past life, ancestrally. There's lots of different ways that the sacral chakra can be energetically stagnant. Okay, so any practices that are going to help you connect into the sacral chakra, work with that, clear that energy through, I definitely recommend. The fourth recommendation is to work with the feminine energy and the feminine energy archetypes. When you have been raised in a patriarchal society and you have perhaps been raised within a monotheistic religion, we're often very disconnected from the divinity of the feminine aspect. So working with the feminine energy archetypes and the feminine wounding, so those mother wounds, those sister wounds, can be really, really helpful for you to heal that wounding that probably is connected to the sacral chakra and other chakras as well. Now, of course, I have the class coming up in autumn where we're going to spend 12 weeks doing this. I'll pop a link to the episode where I talk about that class, and also if you want to get booked in for that class, I'll pop that in the show notes as well. Fifth recommendation is reading fiction books or watching fictional stories. So we really underestimate this imagination, and it's so important to understand the deep connection between imagination and intuition. I'm not going to get into that here today, but understand that they are very intimately connected. Working with the causal realm, the imagination realm, is extremely important for you to expand and evolve. Okay, so really tuning into other people's imagination energy through fiction books, fiction movies, TV series, and just letting your mind wander, letting your mind create these worlds is going to help you connect into this creative energy. Recommendation number 6 is do a program like The Artist's Way. Now, I have not done The Artist's Way. I have the book. It's on my TBR list. I've had a quick look through it, and it does seem like a very thorough, intensive way to connect into the creative energy. And I know some of the practices that are in The Artist's Way are also some of the practices that we do in our Divine Feminine class. So, for example, in Artist's Way, they talk about morning pages. This is the brain dumping that the Akashic Records brought through in respect of working with that. So I know lots of people who've really benefited from a program like The Artist's Way and working with that. Of course, if you've got a lot of trauma, if you've got a lot of stuff going on in respect of sacral chakra and the issues around that, it's always best to get professional help, work with a mentor, a coach, a therapist, whatever it is that you need. But if it's just a case of I want to connect into that creative energy, I know people have benefited from working with that program. And then the 7th recommendation is just commit to connecting to this creative energy consistently. Okay. So what can happen sometimes is people will try to connect into this creative energy once for 10 minutes, or they'll try it for 3 days and then they'll say, I can't do this, I'm no good at this, and then they'll just give up. It's going to take time. If you have essentially disconnected from this creative energy, perhaps since childhood, and you're now in your mid-40s, it's going to take a little bit of time. Okay, so be kind to yourself, give yourself grace, be patient with yourself, but consistently show up. You know, whether that's, okay, I'm going to give myself 30 minutes a day, where I'm just going to paint or draw or write. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to show up every day at the same time. What that's doing, that consistency, is it's using the masculine energy, so our internal masculine energy, to provide a constructor and a container for us to be consistent. So it's providing that safe container for that internal feminine energy to come through. I hope you found this episode helpful. I appreciate I've gone a little bit over my usual time, so thank you if you've managed to listen all the way through, and I shall see you next week for the next episode.